Eric Richard, rapid fire intro. Here we go. In 1 to 2 sentences, who are you?
Oh, wow. That's a good one. Hi, everyone. I'm Eric. I'm from Nomad on Fire. I would say, oh man, I'm a mix of a lot of things. Digital nomad, into financial independence.
And what is your favorite thing about digital nomading?
To me, just the freedom of the lifestyle. Like when I was full-time as a digital nomad, I didn't have a job. I was working on Nomad on Fire. So kind of just working on myself and some creative passions. So just, I would say the chillness of the lifestyle and kind of control over my schedule. Like every single day I was able to wake up and just do exactly what I wanted to do, eat great food, meet cool people, see beautiful places. It was tight.
And where are you now? And what are your 2 to 3 favorite cities in the world?
I'm in Austin, Texas now. That's where I was before I started traveling. That's where I came back to. So I would say that's my home base in the US. Oh, wow. Favorite cities. I really love Chiang Mai. I know that's a popular spot, but I got into such a good groove and just found it like an incredibly easy city to as soon as I stepped off the plane, I was like, oh man, this place feels like home. Closer to the US, I would say Medellin, Colombia. I haven't been there since 2019. I'm not sure what it's like now with COVID and maybe different restrictions and such. But at the time, I really loved it there as well. The weather was perfect. It was pretty affordable. People were super friendly. Yeah, I loved it there.
Those are 2 of my favorite spots as well.
Yeah, man.
What small change has made a big difference in your life?
Small change. Wow, there's a lot of them. I think I'm going to have to go with journaling, though. Me and you have talked about this many times on my show. I think I started journaling pretty consistently in 2015. So what is that? Maybe 6 years or so now that I've been doing it. Just to write down my thoughts. It helps me if I'm anxious or I'm worried about something, but it also helps me kind of visualize and plan for the future, write down my goals, just different things that I'm thinking about. So I feel like I can go back in time and see if it's a negative thing that I'm experiencing, I can see, okay, how did I get through something similar to this previously? And maybe there's some tips or different tools that I forgot about. Same thing for positive things what worked well before, either routine or consistency wise, to kind of help me out. So that's been a really powerful small change.
And what are your favorite digital tools that you use for work?
I love Notion. I don't know if I've gone on a rant in a while, but I'm absolutely a huge fan of Notion. That's what I use for all my journaling. I like physically writing on paper, but it's just so much easier, right, to keep track of digital records. And especially if you're traveling, notebooks and such can be heavy and harder to find stuff. So Notion, I use that for kind of a weekly template, more kind of to-do action, hey, this day I need to knock these things off my list. I also have a higher level kind of vision, goals for the year. And then I do just more of my kind of stream of consciousness, just whatever pops in my head, journaling on that sheet. And then I also have some topic specific kind of notes in there. Another thing similar that I would mention that I haven't heard a lot of people talk about. So if anyone's never heard of it, definitely check it out. It's called Scrivener. It's a writing tool. So if you're a blogger or an author or anything, it's only, I think when I bought it, it might be a different price now, but it was $30 one-time fee. It's just a piece of software that you download. I don't think they have an online component, but it just it's a very good visual for kind of writing. It lets you organize things in note cards, just like you would if you were maybe writing a book and you had chapter 1, chapter 2, and you needed to kind of visualize everything. It's a cool tool for writers that kind of lets you have different documents and has a good file organization system. So I would mention that tool as well.
And what is your favorite book?
I don't know if I have a true favorite book. My favorite finance book is I Will Teach You to Be Rich by Ramit Sethi. I read that right when I came out of college. And I think it's just very good kind of basic personal finance. Hey, this is how you should set up your checking account. This is how you should set up online savings. These are things to keep an eye out for investing, how to use credit cards, very good basic personal finance. So I really like that book. I also really like Win by Daniel Pink. It's more of a, I guess kind of self-help. It has some actionable things, but it's just a very interesting book in regards to timing in like your perception of time, why like beginnings feel different than like the middle of something, like an experience or an event that you're going to, why endings are important, and just like how those memories kind of get like recorded in your brain. So they talk about some other different interesting topics too, like sleep and wake times and different like chronotypes or whatever there. So that's an interesting book too that I really enjoy.
Right on. And last one here is, if you had 20 seconds to live, what message would you share with the world?
Wow. I guess if I only had 20 seconds, I would share that life is short. It's especially really short for me because I only have 15 more seconds now. I would just tell people that life is short and just go, pursue your passions and go after what makes you happy, right? Everyone's going to die one day, right? We all have a limited time here. So why not live life to the fullest and do what makes us happy?
Love it. Love it. Well, Eric, it's good to have you on here. For anyone who doesn't know, I've done, 7 or 8 episodes on Eric's podcast, which is called Nomad on Fire. You should definitely go check it out. Highly recommend. Yeah, it's good to have you here, man.
Heck yeah, man. Yeah, it's good to catch up. All of our conversations I've really enjoyed. It's been fun having you on the show. So now we get to flip the mics around here. You get to ask me some questions. So
here
should
we go.
Should be a good one.
Well, I'd love to start with just an overview of your digital nomad journey, digital nomad focus. So just paint the picture of when it started, what you're up to now, and how it's evolved.
Absolutely. Like for me and for Nomad on Fire, that was kind of combining two really important topics, I guess I would say, in my life. I don't know of another word, of financial independence, retire early, so FIRE, and like living the digital nomad kind of travel, working remotely lifestyle. So I kind of got into digital nomading maybe a little bit differently than a lot of people listening might have. So I actually found out about financial independence first. Right around that time, I received a pretty good promotion and raise at my job. So instead of inflating my lifestyle, I just started like saving and investing a bunch of money every single month. I didn't really travel as a digital nomad until 2019. And I ended up leaving my job earlier that year, and I had saved up like a year's worth of cash as a buffer. So my plan was like, I'm going to leave my full-time job that was very restrictive. I left just for personal reasons because I felt like I didn't have a good work-life balance. Like I was working nights, weekends, had a really long commute, had to be in a physical location. Like it didn't have like literally any remote possibilities at all. And I felt like I was missing out on some of the best years of my life. Like I was making really good money, but I felt like it literally was, the saying like trading your time for money. Like I felt like every hour was just like a slog just to earn money, but I wasn't kind of living my life to the fullest. So I did complete 180, no job, like full freedom. And I decided to join a program called Remote Year. Reason I did that, I'm a little bit of a newer traveler, I would say. Like I'm, not super experienced. And I really wanted to see a lot of places in Latin America, but didn't necessarily feel comfortable kind of doing it by myself. Or I was traveling with my girlfriend at the time. So we both decided, hey, we're going to join Remote Year. Has like all the logistics kind of built in. They set you up with housing, flights between the cities. There's people that are from that city that work for Remote Year. So you have some kind of locals that can tell you, hey, make sure you check out this, make sure you don't go to this part of town, like some of those kind of insider information pieces. And then also I would say the main thing you're paying for there is the community. So my group was 28 people total. So that was amazing just to have those kind of built-in like friendships and tight-knit group of people like right off the bat. So that was fantastic. So end of 2019, I did 4 months on a Remote Year program. So Santiago, Chile, I spent a month there, a month in Lima, Peru, then Medellin, Colombia, and then Mexico City. And then came back for Christmas 2019, spent some time with family. And then early 2020, before started spreading all over the world and, shutting stuff down and adding a bunch of restrictions, I was in Southeast Asia. So I went to Chiang Mai because I had, done so much research, watched so many YouTube videos about digital nomading. I was like, well, I have to check out Chiang Mai. It just has
the Mecca.
The Mecca has such a good reputation. And I did attend the Nomad Summit there, put on by Johnny FD. So I was like, oh, this will be a cool it's a good reason to travel there as well, like an extra reason to kind of network and go to this event. So that was super fun. Like I felt like the speakers were good. The networking opportunities were great. Like I met some like really inspiring people that I've, had on the show and have become friends with and such. That was fun. And then the last day was like a pool party. So I feel like that's just a classic kind of like nomad event. You know, you have some business networking related activities, and then the last day is just like a pool party for everyone to enjoy the great weather and just kind of hang out. So that was fun. Went to some other places in Southeast Asia, spent a little bit of time in Vietnam, went over to Cambodia to see Angkor Wat, and then was in Bali. I was in Canggu for a few weeks in March. And then COVID started, really kind of popping off. I ended up deciding to come back to the US, felt more comfortable doing that. I didn't necessarily want to get stuck somewhere. And I just wanted to spend some time with family. So I lived with my parents for a few months, like 3 months or so. If you would have asked me, at the time, if I thought I would ever be 30 years old and living in my parents' basement, like, back when I was in college or something, I would have told you like, hell no. Like, what kind of loser's like 30 and lives with their parents? But honestly, it was the sickest thing ever. I would totally go do it again. Like, I had my own basically like apartment in the basement. They hooked me up with food. It was just great to like play games and spend time with them and everything. So that was a good experience. And then I ended up finding a full-time job doing what I used to do, supply chain, like operations management. Originally, like I would have loved to either maybe do freelance work or get like a part-time job to still have a lot of that like freedom and flexibility. But this was like April of 2020. So I had no idea how long stuff was going to be locked down for. And I was like, well, shit, like if I can't travel, I might as well like make more money working in an industry that I already have a lot of years of experience in. So that's what I ended up doing. Currently, what I'm still doing now, I'm in Austin, Texas doing that. It does have some remote flexibility. So like I went, last year I was in Michigan for a month, same thing, like visiting my parents, but I really haven't done any sort of long-term digital nomading since the start of 2020. I'm hoping this year to be able to move into a role that has a lot more kind of remote flexibility. I'm still tied to a physical location a little bit, and would love to do some kind of longer term trips. Hopefully some internationally, some I might do like in the States. I might spend some time in Colorado to visit some friends and family and, do some hiking and whatnot out there. But yeah, that pretty much catches us up to present day. I'm definitely anxious to kind of get some new trips coming up this year for sure.
Well, I think we've talked about this before, but I was in Canggu at basically the exact same time and made the same decision, which was I was planning to be in Canggu for all of 2020, and then COVID hit, and I decided to come back to the U.S., live with my parents, wait out the storm. So we were in a very similar situation. Obviously, didn't connect until later. I want to touch on remote year as a organization and as a concept. I mean, everything you said makes a lot of sense because one of the biggest challenges that nomads have is loneliness, and remote year just having that group. And remote year, I think, paused for a while because of COVID, but is now back and active and up and running. I'd love to hear more about your remote year experience.
Yeah, absolutely. I loved it. Like it was a fantastic experience. Kind of digital nomad lifestyle with training wheels, if you will. Like I wasn't ready to fully like take the plunge in terms of just like buying a ticket to some city halfway across the world where like I didn't know anyone. I mean, obviously, I guess I could have tried to like, network and meet people on Facebook groups or different avenues. But I wanted the easy route, right? So remote year is, it's a little bit more expensive. Like I think at the time I was doing it with a partner. So I think we were each paying $1,600 because we were sharing a room. But at the time, if you were doing it on your own, like to have a private bedroom, it was $2,000 a month. But that includes your accommodation for the month, a co-working space membership, flights between the cities on your program, and, different sort of kind of fun events and stuff thrown in there. So, if you're on a budget, it might not be the best program for you. Like it is a little bit expensive. I think it's even more expensive than that now. They might have raised their prices. But to me, it was worth it really to have that community and kind of all the logistics taken care of. And the logistics, I'm sure I could have figured out. Like it's not that hard to go online and book a flight or book an Airbnb somewhere. But the community was the biggest piece. Like not really not feeling any sort of sense of loneliness. If anything, I would say my biggest feelings on remote year was FOMO, because there was just so much going on, and this group wanted to go on a hike, this group wanted to go out drinking and partying, or this group wanted to stay in and play Catan or something. So it's kind of like, wow, there's just so many things going on. Kind of felt like adults study abroad, right? So it was more like managing the group dynamics and like, oh, like how do I want to spend my time? I think I actually, to me, it's really, this is just maybe a personal thing, but if anyone's similar, maybe they could relate. I like to have a good balance. Like I like to have good fitness, feel productive in whatever work that I'm doing, and also have fun. I felt like on remote year, to me, it felt more skewed towards the fun aspect. Like there was a lot of kind of partying and different stuff like that going on. Post remote year, when I was traveling, Chiang Mai is a remote year city. So I kind of dropped in and would hang out with people in that group, which was great. So I still had like the community piece. But since that wasn't like my group that I was continuously traveling with, I didn't feel like as invested in those relationships, if that makes sense. So it was nice that I still had like friends and people to hang out with, but I was more focused on getting into just like a great routine of like spending X number of hours at the co-working space, getting a great workout in, but then also just relaxing, laying by the pool, reading, listening to music or podcasts, and then still going out to eat, for dinner and hanging out with friends and stuff. So finding that balance, I feel like was better to me, but it was definitely worth it to go on remote year. Because once you're like, I don't know if they still do it, but they used to, like once you're a citizen, like if you've done at least 4 months traveling with remote year, you get different discounts on certain remote year kind of activities. And if you want to go for a shorter amount of time, like just to test it out, I think they do 1 month programs. I think they do 1 to 2 week retreats now. So I do feel like that's, if you're willing to spend the money, I think one of those programs is a great way to kind of kickstart the digital nomad lifestyle, kind of dip your toes and test it out and see if you're interested in it.
Awesome. I appreciate that firsthand account and breakdown for anyone that's listening. I want to shift a bit to some of your learnings from the podcast. I feel like at this stage you've done, how many episodes have you done on the podcast?
High 80s.
Okay.
Maybe in the 90s.
Okay.
It's close.
So done a lot of podcast episodes, been interviewing a lot of people from the fire world, from the nomad world. What are some of your big takeaways? Have you had any aha moments? Have you had any big lessons? Yeah, share some of your learnings from, I guess it could be from the process, but really interested to hear from like the episodes and people that you've connected with.
Absolutely. I would say the biggest thing that's just like so amazing to me, kind of both fire and digital nomad, like I think there's a lot of overlap, is just the diversity of experiences and like, I guess ways A, people have made money, and B, like goes along with A, like have been able to afford living a digital nomad lifestyle, right? Like I've met people that had high paying jobs as software developers, they saved and invested a lot, and then they retired in their 30s, and now they just travel around full time. They don't have any sort of work or responsibilities for an employer. They work on kind of passion projects and stuff. Like I do think it's important to be working on something. That doesn't necessarily mean it has to be for a company or it has to be for money, but you probably want to be like productive on something. There's people, that just have normal remote jobs, right? They can work from wherever and they travel around, they make that work. People that work part-time, people that are just taking a sabbatical between jobs, different crazy ways people have made money, right? Just all sorts of different businesses. I talked to some people that they ran like a soccer league and like complex and like different training and stuff. And then they sold that and been traveling around, all sorts of different kind of work from home type of businesses. I guess I would just say the possibilities are endless. Like it seems like if you're passionate about something, there's a way for you to work in that space and find a way to make money doing that. On the flip side, because I will admit to all of your listeners out there, I haven't necessarily applied all of my learnings from the podcast. So I know most people know this, but just to reiterate, like I would say your knowledge of a subject or just in general does not necessarily guarantee like your success. A lot of it is the action, right? Like you have to put in the work to make changes And I've been guilty of this too, right? Just like researching or learning about a topic, but then not necessarily putting in actionable steps to kind of make a change. And I think it can be kind of hard as a digital nomad, like with all those options, right? I think now with the internet and just everything, there's too many choices, right? It's not like, oh, you can either do A, B, or C, and then you can be a digital nomad. Like there's probably a million ways that you could find to make money and live a nomad lifestyle and travel around the world. So I feel like it's really finding like what your passion or what your purpose is, and then finding a way to make money. You don't like what you're doing, but you're making a good amount of money. Like maybe you just grind it out for a few years and you save and invest a shitload. That gives you the freedom that you don't have to work for like the next 10 years or something, right? So there's so many different options, I guess, is my biggest learning.
Yeah, I think two interesting things that you touched on that I definitely resonate with are ones that there is no one path. There's no one way to do this, which is digital nomading, or really anything. Like people are doing it in a million different ways. And two, which ties into the first point, is basically that like you just have to make it happen. And I think I've started thinking about how I feel like there are two types of people in the world. There's people who like find problems and obstacles, and there's people who find solutions and make shit happen. And obviously, to your point where you mentioned, we all are guilty, or you said you're guilty of learning things and not necessarily applying them, which I do. We all do that the same, where we might deep dive on something and learn and not actually apply it. But I do think that fundamentally, it's like you just have to make it happen, and there is no path, and you can go wherever you want. So I'm all about it. I feel like the digital nomad world in general as well, it's like an unstructured. I mean, you're just trying to figure out how to make money and be wherever you want. And now remote work, which is exploding, has made it so much easier. But there's also so many other ways to make it happen.
It's exciting, but can be overwhelming at the same time, right? Like it's so cool to have so many choices out there. And I guess I want people to realize that, right? Like don't be limited just because, oh, I went to school for this, or, oh, I've been working in this industry. Like I have to continue doing this. Like I feel like there's so many different options out there, but then it can be challenging, right? With so many different options, you can get lost in the analysis paralysis of like, oh, what if this happens? Oh, what if that happens? So I don't know. I guess probably journaling, right, is the best way to figure that out. Like write down your thoughts. Hey, if I chose this option, what are the pros and cons? If I do this, what are the pros and cons? And then just self-reflecting, chat with friends and family, and coming up with the best move.
Well, I want to shift a little bit to talking about your FIRE journey. I feel like you already painted an overview of your FIRE journey and how you've gotten to where you are. I'd be curious to know, for anyone who's not that familiar with FIRE, are there any key resources, might be a book, blog post, thought leader, website that you recommend for someone who wants to deep dive on this topic?
Oh, wow. There's so many out there. If you just start Googling, you'll come across just a million. I would say the OG is Mr. Money Mustache. That's who I first came across. He's got a really great blog. I would say a lot of his articles like not only have kind of the math piece, which once you understand it is pretty simple and straightforward, but a lot of his stuff kind of helps around the mindset piece. Like I naturally am kind of a big spender on like things, and I had to get like on board with the FIRE. I had to kind of, coach myself, I guess, to realize like, hey, buying this like huge flat screen TV like isn't going to make you happier, right? Like it's going to feel really cool and you're going to be excited for like a few days, a week, like however long, but then that's going to fade, right? It's more important to save and invest that money to buy your future freedom, and experiences trump like physical things. So his blog is really good for that. Millennial Revolution is another great blog. Christy and Bryce are awesome. I met them actually in Chiang Mai at the Nomad Summit. They retired in their 30s and now are traveling around the world, like living as digital nomads, but they're fully retired, which is sick. They also have a book out, which is really good. Podcast, Choose Fi is like the most popular podcast out there for financial independence. That's a really good one. Good resources, a lot of great guests. I don't think she releases anymore, but Fire Drill is also another great podcast. I found a lot of just kind of funny, good stories. I'm more of like a story kind of learning person. even though I'm really interested in fire, like it would get kind of boring to me if you're like, oh, save X amount. And, you definitely can find some more technical advice, but I love hearing people's stories of like, I was a teacher only making 40K and then I invested in real estate and now like have all this money. So the story piece of it is like very inspiring. I really like those.
Cool. And I have it might sound like a random question, but I'm really curious to get your response on this, which is what would 15-year-old you say about your life now?
What would 15-year-old me, like seeing where I'm at, like if I was 15, but seeing
15-year-old you saw what your life is like now, what would he say?
Yeah, that's an amazing question. I think growing up, I was like pretty traditional in terms of like, I always got good grades in school. I played sports. Like, I think I was on maybe a more like normal traditional path, I guess, if that makes sense. Like, I think 15-year-old me, like I would have thought that I would be married by now, like have a house, like be more settled down and have things figured out. Where I feel like I've realized now, like, I don't know if anyone has anything. Does anyone have their life figured out, right? Like, I feel like everyone is on their own path. Everyone's on their own journey. There's always going to be someone doing better than you, right? Someone's going to make more money than you. Someone's going to have traveled to more countries than you. They're going to have a hotter girlfriend than you do. Like, there's people that are going to be ahead of you, but there's always going to be people that are behind you too, that you're doing better than. So I feel like, the competition is just between you, right? Just the person in the mirror. Like, are you doing better than you were last week? Are you doing better than you were last year? And I would say maybe I'm not as responsible or like settled down or stable as I would have thought that I would be in, my early 30s as a 15-year-old. But I've had so many great experiences. So looking back, I mean, I have no regrets. I feel like those relationships and experiences, right, trump everything. So I think 15-year-old me would be happy. I think they'd be like, oh, dang,
surprised,
that's pretty
but
cool.
Happy. Surprised, but happy.
But like, oh, that's cool.
Well, let's shift to Austin, Texas. And I think specifically probably from the perspective of a digital nomad, but it could also be a long-term move because there's a lot of Americans moving to Austin, Texas, as you're well aware. Let's start with, what are your general thoughts on Austin, pros, cons? Give us the overview.
I'll give kind of a full summary so maybe people get a better perspective. I moved here in 2016. I was coming from Louisville, Kentucky. Now in hindsight, I actually really like and kind of miss Louisville. At the time, I was like, oh, this place sucks. Like, I don't want to live in Kentucky. Like, yeah, heck yeah. Like, let's get out of here. But now I kind of miss like the laid back, low key lifestyle and the cost of living there and great restaurants. But anyway, moved to Austin. Like, I was younger, like I was mid 20s at the time. And I absolutely loved it when I first moved here. Like, I lived with my brother. We made a lot of friends at our apartment pool. So we would just have sick pool parties. Like, we had a huge DJ speaker. We would take it out there and just like, would just rage at the pool. Like, it was awesome. It was a lot of fun. Austin has great food. Like, if you like partying or drinking, I think Austin has more bars per square mile than like any other city in the country. If that is your thing, it's great. There's also a lot of good outdoor things to do, like Lady Bird Lake around downtown. You can paddleboard, you can kind of swim and hang. I don't think you're supposed to swim, but like you can be in the water out there. A lot of great pools. Like, even if you don't live here, you're just visiting. Like, I'm sure your hotel probably has a really nice pool. Lake Travis, a lot of people like go there and rent party barges. That's a fun thing to do. So yeah, outdoor. If it's not too hot, right, I would check like what time of year you're coming. Like, it can definitely be over 100 for many months out of the year. So that's a little unbearable unless you're in the water somewhere. Food is fantastic. Like, I love tacos and Mexican food. So there's a lot of that here. Great barbecue. I also love barbecue. So there's that. Yeah, it's a fun city. So I loved it when I first moved here. Like, literally, I lived right on South Congress. So coming home, like pulling in my apartment, I saw like the downtown view and the Capitol was like right there in front of me. So it was just kind of a magical, like awesome view. I was like so grateful. Like, at first I was like, I can't believe I live here. Like, this is the sickest place. Like, the weather's awesome. The people are friendly. I guess I forgot to mention that. Like, Austin has so many transplants. So I feel like if you're like younger, like if you're in your 20s, you will be able, if you don't know anyone by chance, like you would be able to meet a lot of cool people because I don't feel like it's very cliquey, right? Because so many people are transplants to Austin. I feel like that breeds a culture of like people are more open to meeting new people and having new experiences, which I found like that was great. Over time, it was probably just my situation with work that I was in, but over time, the negatives started to pile up. Like kind of bias in your mind, right? I think for me, I try to be a positive, optimistic person. So I only recognize like all of the positives. Some of the glaring negatives like didn't pop out right at first. So those popped up later. It's expensive. Like Austin is not a cheap city to live in. I have a 1-bedroom apartment by myself, and I mean, I can afford it, but it's like way more than I would like to pay. And I'm not saving and investing as much for fire as I would like to. So the cost is a downside. It's popular, but there's definitely way too many people moving here. Like the prices of homes are outrageous. The traffic on I-35 is absolutely terrible. Like if you need to go north to south in the city during like rush hour or even just random points in the day, like good luck, right?
Or even if you're trying to go across I-30, if you're trying to go east to west, you can get caught up in everything else being a lock grid.
But yeah, great. Like it's a fun place to live. Like I enjoy living here. Again, like I talked about community and the relationships. Like I have a really, really good group of friends that I've been friends with like for the last 5 or 6 years. So it's great for me to be back here, and there is a lot of fun stuff to do. But yeah, I would say cost, traffic, and just the busyness. Like it is a very, like I think the leaders of Austin or whatever, like wanted to keep it small. Like they didn't want it to be like a huge tech metropolis like it's becoming. So the infrastructure hasn't necessarily caught up with like the rapid population growth. So there are like some frustrating things with that regard, but I think they're trying to fix that. So
that makes sense. To hit some different check boxes. One question is the Wi-Fi, but I feel like the Wi-Fi in Austin, I mean, you can find good Wi-Fi everywhere, right? That's Wi-Fi is not like an issue.
Yeah, it's a Google fiber city too. So yeah, you can get some really good Wi-Fi.
And then cost of living, you already touched on. Apartments, I mean, I imagine costs in general are going up because so many people are moving in. And food and drinks, meals? I'm trying to think of meal prices from when I was there. I guess meals are anywhere from like, you can eat at food trucks and kind of keep your costs down a little bit. I guess it's like any major US city, probably slightly cheaper than like the big expensive ones, but it's definitely not a cheap city, as you said. On the weather and best months to visit side, give us your thoughts there.
I would say like the shoulder seasons or like spring and fall. March, maybe you're guaranteed it to be beautiful. Like last March was awesome. But then all of April, I swear it rained every day. Like it does rain like a decent amount here during some month. It's very like specific to like maybe one period of time in the year though. All summer, I mean, it's going to be super hot, right? Unless you're going to be like outside in the water, I would maybe, or you're going to be inside the whole time. Like I wouldn't necessarily come in the summer. Also, one thing that was super weird when I first moved here that I didn't realize, I'm used to like going to visit California as a kid. California, my family lives in San Jose. It would be hot during the day, but then it's nice, right? It's California. It would cool down to like the 60s at night. So I came to Austin. I was like, oh, well, it's like 110 during the day, but I was like, oh, the sun's going to go down and it's going to cool down. It would still be over 100. I was like, oh no, it doesn't get cold at night. So that was rather unfortunate. So I would say sometime in the spring or fall. October, sometimes it can still be super hot, or it can be kind of milder and like in the 70s, right? Like 70s, 80s is probably like my perfect temperature.
Yeah. I spent 3 months in Austin and I got there beginning of October. And I think I left beginning of January, and October was amazing. And then I'm a little spoiled. I mean, I'm in Puerto Rico right now where it's 80 every single day or low 80s. But I found the winter, it's relative, but I found the winter in Austin to be like a little cold and dark. I think compared to like Miami, in the best weather, it's cold and dark. Compared to Boston, it's amazing. So it's all relative, I think.
All about perspective. Yeah, like you usually don't get snow. Like sometimes I miss Kentucky because it had like a true 4 seasons. Like there was definitely a very specific spring, summer, fall, winter, where here in Austin, I feel like it just goes from super hot, maybe decent, And then it definitely does get cold. Usually not a lot of snow, but yeah, I mean, sometimes it'll drop into like the 40s or 50s and be gray and cloudy. And you're like, this is better than a foot of snow, but is it better than 80 and sunny?
Last question for you on Austin, neighborhoods, like best or worst neighborhoods. Any recommendations for someone who's who's looking at Austin on a map and they're like, where the hell do I go?
I mean, I'm a South Side guy at heart, so I'd have to represent the South Side there. Like South Congress, Barton Springs, Zilker Park kind of areas. Like those are really cool. I mean, if you're coming to visit, I would probably just stay right downtown. It's going to be a little bit more expensive, but everything is going to be walkable. Like I would say downtown, it's a very walkable city. Like there's a lot of bars, but there's really only 4 main areas, and 3 of them are on the same street. Like there's West 6th, there's Dirty 6th in the middle, which is more touristy and college and kind of sketchy. There's East 6th, which kind of has its own like eclectic, like keep Austin weird type of vibe. And then there's Rainy Street. Also, that's another, while we're recording, I just got to throw that out there. Rainy Street used to be so much sicker. Like it's all these little bungalow houses that they converted to bars. And it used to just have like such a cool vibe. Like it felt like you were at a house party, but you were in the middle of like a huge city. It's still kind of like that, but now Rainy has like all these huge high-rise condos on it that never used to be there. So, which is fine, but I don't know, just feels a little bit different. Feels like too many people moved here is what it feels like.
Fair enough. Well, yeah, I mean, I think one thought there is from what I gathered from my time there, there's a lot of different good areas. It's kind of just what you want. Like I lived in East Austin over in like East 6th area. And there's a lot of new places there. And I mean, there's apartment buildings popping up everywhere. And so I think depending on your preferences, and if you're really considering Austin, you probably want to go visit or like hop on a call with someone who knows it well, who can give you some guidance on different spots. I think we'll wrap up there. My last question for you is for people who want to learn more about you and your work and your podcast, any websites, social media handles you want to plug?
Yeah, Nomad on Fire on everything. So check out nomadonfire.com. I have a contact form there. Give the podcast a listen. Cam has been on many times. Nomad on Fire podcast on all the major players. And then social media, I'm probably most active on Instagram. I'm just at Nomad on Fire there. So send me a DM or something. Love to connect.
Awesome. Well, Eric, thank you for being here. I appreciate it.
Appreciate it, Cam. Yeah, this is a lot of fun, man. Glad we got to connect.